The flight back from Seattle had been a nightmare of turbulence and delayed connections, leaving me exhausted to my very bones. I had spent the last 4 days locked in sterile conference rooms, arguing over risk margins and liability clauses for commercial shipping fleets. It was the kind of high-stakes, high-pressure environment that I thrived in, the kind of environment that allowed me to build a life entirely on my own terms. As a senior risk underwriter for a major firm in downtown Chicago, my brain was permanently wired to look for vulnerabilities. I was paid a very generous salary to anticipate the absolute worst-case scenarios and build ironclad safety nets against them. So, when my Uber finally pulled up to my apartment building on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, all I wanted was the predictable, secure sanctuary of my own home. I dragged my heavy suitcase through the lobby, nodded to the doorman, and rode the elevator up to the 14th floor. The familiar ding of the elevator arriving at my floor usually signaled a release of tension. But the moment I pushed my key into the heavy oak door of my apartment and stepped inside, my professional instincts flared to life. The air felt heavy. It was completely wrong. My apartment was a meticulously clean, minimalist space. It usually smelled like cedar, fresh linen, and the dark roast coffee beans I kept in a sealed glass jar on the counter. Today, however, the air was suffocatingly thick with a cloying, artificially sweet floral scent. It was a designer perfume. A very specific, obnoxiously expensive limited edition blend of jasmine and vanilla that cost nearly $500 a bottle. My younger sister, Gemma, bathed in it daily. She called it her signature aura, a vital component of her brand as a holistic wellness influencer. I called it a massive, glaring red flag. I did not call out her name. I dropped my suitcase by the ceramic bowl in the entryway, leaving my wet raincoat on, and walked silently down the hallway. My pulse remained unnervingly steady, but my mind was already racing through a terrifying calculus of probabilities. Why was she here? She lived an hour away in the suburbs with our parents. She never visited me unless she needed a loan or a place to crash after a fight with her current boyfriend. I checked the living room. Empty. The kitchen. Empty. The guest bathroom. Empty. I walked into my master bedroom. The space looked completely untouched at first glance. The bed was made with military precision, the blinds were drawn exactly to the height I always left them, and my vanity was organized perfectly. But I did not care about the visible space. I walked straight into my walk-in closet. The heavy winter coats hung in a neat, color-coordinated row against the back wall. Behind those coats was a custom-built false drywall panel that I had installed myself 2 years ago. Behind that seamless panel was a heavy, commercial-grade steel fireproof safe, bolted directly into the structural studs of the building. I pushed the coats aside. The panel was slightly ajar. It was maybe a millimeter off its track, an imperfection so tiny that a normal person would never have noticed it. But I was not a normal person. I slid the panel all the way open. The biometric keypad on the heavy steel door beeped its familiar, cold tone as I quickly punched in the numerical backup code instead of waiting to scan my fingerprint. The heavy metal door swung outward with a soft, mechanical click that sounded absolutely deafening in the silent apartment. I looked inside. Empty. $60,000 in physical, banded $100 bills. Gone. I did not scream. I did not drop to my knees. I did not violently tear my closet apart or start weeping hysterically. I just stood there, breathing in the metallic smell of cold steel, staring blankly at the dark, empty space where my life savings were supposed to be sitting. That money was not just cash. It was the physical manifestation of my sweat, my endless overtime hours, and my sacrificed weekends. And yet, technically, it was not mine to keep. It was a massive withdrawal I had made just hours before my flight to Seattle. It was destined for a specialized escrow account to secure Gemma's tuition for her first year of a prestigious private law school. My father, Tobias, had called me a week prior, his voice cracking with a desperate, pleading tone. He had literally wept on the phone. He told me that Gemma had finally woken up to reality, that she wanted to leave her toxic internet lifestyle behind and do something meaningful with her life. Gemma is a fragile soul, Sloan, he had pleaded, using the same tired excuse he had used for 20 years. "You're tough. You have always been our solid rock. Do not crush her with your expectations. She needs this chance to prove herself, and the school needs the funds held in escrow immediately to guarantee her spot. We have nothing left to give her." Those pathetic words echoed in my head now, a sickening reminder of my own blinding stupidity. I had willfully ignored my own professional instincts. I had assessed a catastrophic risk and insured it anyway, simply because the client shared my last name. I reached my hand deep into the dark steel box, running my fingertips along the cold metal bottom, just to make sure my eyes were not deceiving me. My fingers brushed against a small, crumpled piece of paper that had been shoved aggressively into the back left corner. I pulled it out, my jaw tightening so hard my teeth ached, and carried it to the warm light of my bedside lamp. It was a glossy receipt, printed on high-quality thermal paper. The header, embossed in elegant silver lettering, read, "Beverly Hills Elite Recovery Clinic." My eyes rapidly scanned the itemized list printed in neat, sterile ink. Recovery suite. Private overnight nursing care. Postoperative medications. Specialized luxury compression garments. The total at the bottom of the page was staggering. But it was not the massive amount of money that made the air freeze in my lungs and my blood run completely cold. It was the name printed clearly under the patient billing section. The name on the receipt was not Gemma. It was Sloan. My name. She did not just break into my safe and take my money. She used my identity. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it washed over me, not as a wave of panic, but as a creeping, icy realization of pure malice. A desperate thief takes the cash and runs. An entitled, malignant narcissist leaves a luxury clinic receipt with your own name on it because they fundamentally do not fear the consequences of their actions. I knew exactly what was happening in her twisted mind. She thought I would do what I always did. She thought I would discover the devastating loss, have a massive panic attack, cry myself to sleep, and then eventually fix it quietly to save our parents the heartbreak and public embarrassment. She expected me to swallow the agony so the family image could remain flawless. She was actively waiting for me to break down. Instead, standing there in the quiet isolation of my violated bedroom, holding the hard evidence of her federal crime, I just grinned. It was not a happy smile. It was the dark, dangerous smile of an underwriter who realizes a massive fraudulent claim has just been handed to her on a silver platter, complete with a signed confession. The crushing anxiety I had carried for my entire life, the suffocating pressure of being the invisible, responsible daughter, suddenly evaporated into thin air. There was nothing left to protect anymore. The situation had escalated far beyond a petty family theft into felony identity theft and grand larceny. She had targeted exactly the wrong person. What followed was not going to be a messy family argument filled with tears and empty apologies. It was going to be a systematic, surgical dismantling of her entire world. I folded the receipt with precise movements, slid it into my pocket, and walked into the kitchen to make a pot of black coffee. The war had officially started. To truly understand why $60,000 in raw cash was sitting in a hidden safe in my closet, you have to understand the toxic, suffocating gravity of my family dynamic. I grew up in a household where love was never a steady, reliable stream that nourished everyone equally. Love was a high-powered spotlight. And that spotlight only ever shone on one person, Gemma. Our parents, Tobias and Delia, built a massive, impenetrable museum of excuses for her bad behavior, and I was merely the unpaid janitor tasked with keeping the floors clean, the exhibits looking pristine, and the bills paid. I remember my 16th birthday with a crystal clarity that still stings like a fresh paper cut when I think about it. I woke up early that morning, my heart fluttering with the quiet, desperate hope of at least finding a cheap supermarket greeting card or a single pancake on the kitchen table. There was absolutely nothing. The house was in total chaos. Mom was rushing around frantically looking for Gemma's competitive cheerleading uniform, screaming about a missing pom-pom, while Dad was pacing the living room on a loud conference call, waving me away when I tried to say good morning. I spent that entire afternoon and late into the freezing evening working a grueling double shift at the local gas station on the edge of town. I wiped down oil-stained pumps, mopped filthy linoleum floors that smelled like stale beer, and counted out greasy change for tired truckers. I was saving every single dime I made so I could eventually buy a used, beat-up sedan to drive myself to school, because I knew nobody was going to buy one for me. 3 years later, on Gemma's 16th birthday, the narrative was completely different. The entire house was decorated with expensive balloon arches. My father, claiming he wanted to give his little girl the world, secretly took out a second mortgage on our modest suburban home. He bought her a brand new, cherry-red convertible with a massive white bow on the hood. I remember standing on the front porch, shivering in my worn-out jacket, watching her shriek with joy in the driveway. The afternoon sun caught her perfect blonde hair and her bright, flawless smile, while Dad looked at her like she had just cured a terrible disease. I asked him once, later that night when the guests had left, why the rules were so drastically different for us. Why she got a car and a party, and I got a double shift at a gas station. He placed a heavy, dismissive hand on my shoulder, looking at me with a sickening mixture of pity and utter annoyance. "You do not need coddling, Sloane," he had said, sighing deeply as if my very existence and my simple question was a massive burden to his day. "You are strong. You are resilient. You figure things out on your own. Your sister is different. She needs extra support. The world is too harsh and unforgiving for someone as sensitive and delicate as her. You need to understand that and stop being so jealous." That singular, crushing sentence became the overarching mantra of my entire life. Sloane figures it out. Gemma needs support. When I got accepted into a prestigious university in Chicago on a partial academic scholarship, I thought they would finally be proud of me. Instead, Mom sat at the kitchen table, staring at the acceptance letter, and loudly complained about how the remaining tuition would severely tighten their grocery budget and force them to cancel their annual trip to Florida. I did not argue. I quietly took out massive, high-interest student loans and worked 3 exhausting jobs simultaneously. I waitressed at a diner until midnight, shelved dusty books in the campus library at dawn, and tutored struggling freshmen on the weekends. I lived on instant noodles and tap water, graduating with honors and a mountain of debt that I paid off myself within 5 years through sheer, agonizing financial discipline. When Gemma failed her college entrance exams twice in a row, the reaction was entirely different. Dad did not ground her. He did not demand she study harder or hire a tutor. He blamed the entire American educational system. He aggressively argued that standardized tests were inherently flawed and simply did not understand or measure her unique creative genius. Soon after, she proudly announced she was not going to college at all. Instead, she was going to be a holistic wellness content creator. That was just a fancy, modern way of saying she wanted to stay home rent-free, buy incredibly expensive clothes on Dad's credit card, and post highly edited, heavily filtered pictures of avocado toast while lecturing her 50 internet followers about manifesting wealth and maintaining positive energy. For years, I played my assigned part flawlessly. I moved to Chicago permanently, built a lucrative, high-stress career in risk analysis, and essentially became the family ATM. I was the invisible child until they desperately needed a severe problem solved. If the water heater broke in the middle of a brutal winter, Mom called Sloane. If Gemma maxed out another credit card and aggressive debt collectors started calling the house and threatening legal action, Dad called Sloane. I paid the bills. I fixed the messes. I stayed quiet. I thought, with a pathetic, naive desperation, that by being the reliable, successful one, I would eventually earn the genuine respect and unconditional love I so deeply craved. But you cannot buy genuine affection from people who view you as an appliance. You do not love a refrigerator, you just expect it to keep your food cold. And if it stops working, you kick it until it turns back on. I learned early on, my hard-earned success was their financial safety net, but her constant, preventable failures were their tragic masterpiece that required endless funding and emotional labor. So when they begged me for her law school tuition, playing expertly on my deepest insecurities and my desperate desire for a normal, loving family, I should have known better. I should have seen the massive red flags waving violently in my face. But I was blinded by a sudden, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, Gemma was finally growing up and taking responsibility for her life. I wanted to believe in the illusion so badly that I let them walk right into my vault. The entire elaborate law school disaster started exactly 2 months ago. Dad called me on a Tuesday night, his voice trembling with a level of intense, raw emotion I had not heard from him in years. He told me Gemma had experienced a profound, life-altering epiphany. She was exhausted. She was tired of the shallow influencer lifestyle, tired of the fake friends on the internet, and wanted to do something real, something that mattered to society. She wanted to study corporate law. He sounded so incredibly proud, so endlessly and desperately hopeful, that I actually felt a rare pang of warmth in my chest, a foolish spark of optimism that my family was finally healing. She got in, Sloan, he said, practically weeping through the phone speaker. She got into that elite private law program she was looking at in California. It is a miracle. But they have a very strict policy for late admissions. They need proof of funds immediately. They need the first year's tuition held in an independent escrow account by the end of the month, or she loses her spot entirely. I have maxed out my credit lines trying to help her with her business. We have absolutely nothing left to borrow against the house. Please. I am begging you on my knees. She is turning her life around, and I cannot let her lose this because I am broke. I hesitated. My professional instincts, honed by years of sniffing out corporate fraud and bad investments, screamed at me to hang up the phone immediately. I asked to see the acceptance letter. Mom emailed it to me the very next day. I opened the PDF on my massive work monitor and scrutinized it. It looked completely official. It featured the high-resolution crest of a well-known university, the digital signature of the Dean of Admissions, and a glowing, personalized congratulatory message welcoming Gemma to the incoming fall class. I stared at that PDF for a long time, cross-referencing the fonts and the layout in my mind, searching for inconsistencies. My analytical brain told me it was an astronomical risk. Gemma had never shown a single ounce of interest in academics, let alone the rigorous, grueling discipline required for law school. But my heart, that stupid, lingering inner child who just wanted her father to speak to her with the same pride he reserved for her sister, won the brutal internal argument. I agreed to help fund her future. I contacted my wealth management broker the next morning and liquidated a significant portion of my high-yield investment portfolio. Dad insisted I withdraw it in physical cash. He claimed the specific escrow agent the school used in California required a certified cashier's check that he wanted to physically purchase at his local bank and hand over together with Gemma. He said he wanted to make it a special, bonding father-daughter moment, a symbol of her new beginning. It was a bizarre, convoluted request that made very little logistical sense, but I was so exhausted from fighting their endless drama that I just gave in. I brought the $60,000 home in a heavy canvas duffel bag and locked it in my safe, planning to go to the bank with Dad the moment I got back from my business trip to Seattle. It was a charade. A massive, perfectly orchestrated lie. And I had eagerly bought a premium front-row ticket to the show. Sitting in my kitchen now, drinking the dark, bitter coffee, the puzzle pieces violently snapped together in my mind, forming a horrifying picture. The weird, insisting cash requirement. The exact timing of my business trip. Gemma casually texting me last week, pretending to care about my life, asking for my exact flight schedule so she knew when I would be landing. She knew exactly when I would be gone, and she knew exactly how much money was sitting behind that false wall. But how did she get the code? The safe was a high-end biometric model with a backup numerical PIN pad. I never used the PIN. I kept it memorized, never written down on any piece of paper, never saved in a digital note anywhere in the apartment or on my phone. I sipped my coffee, the dark liquid matching the sudden, terrifying darkness plunging into my thoughts. There was only one other person on this entire planet who knew that numerical PIN. Years ago, during a terrifying medical scare where I thought I might need major surgery and wanted someone to have access to my living will, I had given the code to my mother. Just in case something happened to me and she needed to access my documents. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the stomach, stealing my breath. The air in the kitchen felt suddenly thin, almost unbreathable. If Gemma had the code to that safe, it meant Mom gave it to her. Delia, the woman who bitterly complained about my college tuition costing too much, had willingly handed my sister the keys to my life savings. She had conspired with her youngest daughter to rob her oldest daughter blind. I set the ceramic mug down on the cool granite counter. My hands were perfectly still. There was no shaking. There were no tears blurring my vision. Just a cold, terrifyingly calculating focus settling over my brain like a thick layer of ice. The sadness was gone. The betrayal had burned away all the lingering familial obligation, leaving only a sharp, crystalline clarity. Before we dive into what Gemma actually did with the cash, hit that like button if you've ever ignored your gut feeling just to keep the peace in your family. Because what I found next shattered any peace we had left. I pulled the crumpled clinic receipt from my coat pocket and smoothed it out flat on the granite countertop, analyzing every single printed character like it was a piece of evidence at a crime scene. Beverly Hills Elite Recovery Clinic. I opened my laptop and typed the name into the search bar. The website loaded instantly, flooding my screen with soft, soothing pastel colors, high-definition images of serene women relaxing in plush white robes, and bold promises of discreet, premium cosmetic enhancement recovery. This was not a hospital. This was a luxury vacation for people recovering from elective surgery. I picked up my phone and dialed the toll-free number displayed at the top of the screen. I needed hard, undeniable facts before I dropped the bomb on my family. Beverly Hills Elite, this is Bryony speaking. How can I assist you on this beautiful day? The voice was bright, highly polished, and overly eager to please, the exact tone you expect from a high-end concierge service. Hi, Bryony, I said, pitching my voice up a register to sound slightly breathless, panicked, and confused. This is Sloan. I was a patient there just a few days ago. I am so incredibly sorry to bother you, but I seem to have misplaced my discharge paperwork and my final itemized billing statement during my chaotic travel back home. My accountant is absolutely breathing down my neck for tax purposes, and I need to get this sorted today. Is there any way you could pull up my file and email me a copy? Oh, of course, Sloan. Do not worry at all. That happens all the time with our traveling clients. Let me just pull up your file in our system. One moment, please. I heard the rapid clicking of a mechanical keyboard through the speaker. My heart beat a slow, measured rhythm against my ribs, a stark contrast to the panic I was projecting in my voice. Okay, here you are. Let's see, wow, you had quite the extensive session with Dr. Vance. Rhinoplasty, buccal fat removal, and the premium full-body liposuction package. I hope you are resting comfortably and the swelling is going down nicely. I closed my eyes tightly, feeling a wave of pure, unadulterated nausea wash over me. A nose job, cheek fat removal, and full-body lipo. $60,000 to carve up her face and suck the fat out of her body so she could look better in her heavily filtered Instagram photos. That was her grand epiphany. That was her profound desire to do something meaningful with her life. That was her law school. I am managing the pain. I forced a light, strained chuckle, gripping the edge of the counter. Listen, Bryony, I just need to verify the exact payment method for my records so I know how to categorize it. Did I pay the entire balance in cash? Let me check the financial ledger, Bryony said cheerfully, oblivious to the fact that she was handing me the nails for my sister's coffin. Yes. You paid the $40,000 surgical fee and the $20,000 luxury recovery clinic fee entirely in cash up front upon arrival. But wait, I do see a secondary charge here for your post-operative care. Your prescription painkillers, the extended private nursing care, and the luxury compression garments. We ran that through your medical insurance first, and the remaining heavy copay was put on the credit card you opened with our financing partner. My eyes snapped open, glaring at the kitchen wall. The blood in my veins turned to ice. Excuse me? A credit card? Yes, the CarePlus medical credit line we opened for you on Tuesday. It is maxed out at $10,000, but it covered all the extra expenses beautifully, so you didn't have to worry about any out-of-pocket costs while you were healing in the suite. Right. Thank you, Bryony. That is all the information I needed. I hung up the phone without waiting for a goodbye and immediately opened a new tab on my browser, logging frantically into my premium credit monitoring service. My credit score, which normally hovered in the elite upper tier thanks to years of meticulous, obsessive financial planning, had tanked. A new hard inquiry and a maxed-out $10,000 credit line were sitting right there in bright red pixels, dragging my pristine financial reputation through the mud. She did not just steal my life savings to alter her face. She stole my actual identity. She used my premium corporate medical insurance for the expensive drugs, and she forged my signature to open a high-interest line of credit in my name to pay for her luxury nurses. The money from the safe was a family betrayal. But the credit card and the insurance fraud? That was a federal offense. And the absolute worst part? She was scheduled to arrive home in exactly 2 hours. I felt a massive surge of pure, unfiltered adrenaline course through my veins. The initial shock was entirely gone, replaced by a cold, calculating rage. This was no longer just a toxic family dispute about favoritism. It was wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. She had crossed a line from which there was no return, and I was going to make sure she felt the full, devastating weight of the law. The heavy front door unlocked at exactly 2 in the afternoon. The sound of the deadbolt echoing through the silent, tense apartment felt like a starting gun. I was sitting casually on the living room sofa, my laptop open on my knees, pretending to be deeply engrossed in a complex risk assessment spreadsheet. My father walked in first, holding the heavy wooden door wide open. His face was stretched into a dramatic, agonizing mask of deep concern, his brow furrowed so tightly it looked painful. My mother followed closely behind him, carrying a massive designer overnight bag that definitely did not belong to her. And then came Gemma. She walked incredibly slowly, leaning heavily on our mother's arm like a wounded soldier returning from a brutal, exhausting battle. Her entire head and face were wrapped in thick, white medical bandages, leaving only her eyes and her swollen, bruised mouth visible. She wore oversized, dark designer sunglasses indoors, and her body was swallowed in a massive, puffy luxury tracksuit that was clearly meant to hide the surgical compression garments underneath. She looked exactly like a mummy that had recently raided a high-end boutique on Rodeo Drive. Every step she took was accompanied by a theatrical wince. "Oh, my poor, sweet baby," my mother cooed loudly, carefully guiding Gemma toward the plush velvet armchair directly across from me. "Just sit right here. I will make you a special antioxidant smoothie to help with the inflammation. Tobias, get her a soft pillow for her lower back, quickly. She cannot strain her muscles." My father rushed to grab a decorative throw pillow from the couch, fussing over her like she was made of fragile, antique glass that might shatter into a million pieces at any given moment. "Sloan, good, you are home early," he said, barely glancing in my direction, his focus entirely consumed by the golden child. "Your sister was in a terrible, terrifying car accident in Beverly Hills. A horrific hit and run. She is so incredibly lucky to be alive right now. The doctors had to do emergency reconstructive surgery on her nose and jaw just to stabilize her. A car accident." That was the ridiculous, fabricated, utterly delusional story they were going with to explain the extensive bandages and the sudden physical trauma. I looked directly at Gemma. Behind the dark, reflective lenses of her expensive sunglasses, I could physically feel her watching me intently. She knew that I had to know the $60,000 was gone from the safe. She was actively testing the waters, waiting for the inevitable, explosive confrontation, fully ready to play the ultimate victim in front of our parents. "A car accident," I repeated, my voice perfectly flat, entirely devoid of any emotional inflection. "How awful. Are you okay, Gemma?" "That sounds like a truly traumatic experience." "It hurts so much," she whimpered, her voice intentionally muffled by the thick bandages, sounding incredibly pathetic and weak. "I am just so deeply traumatized by the whole ordeal. I cannot even close my eyes without seeing the other car swerving into my lane." My mother hurried back from the kitchen, holding a tall glass of thick pink smoothie with a metal reusable straw. She handed it to Gemma with trembling, anxious hands, treating her like royalty. Drink this, sweetie. You need your strength to recover for law school next month. You have a massive academic journey ahead of you. Gemma reached for the glass with a visibly shaking hand, playing her part flawlessly. As she brought the heavy glass toward her bandaged face, she intentionally tilted her wrist. The thick, sticky pink liquid sloshed violently over the rim of the glass, splashing directly onto the neat stack of printed insurance contracts I had purposefully placed on the glass coffee table just moments before. "Oops," Gemma said, her tone dripping with a sickeningly fake innocence that made my stomach churn. "My hands are just so weak from the terrible trauma. I have zero grip strength. You will clean it up, right, Sloane?" "I am so sorry." My mother immediately grabbed a decorative towel from the side table, waving away the blatant disrespect. "Oh, do not worry, Gemma. Sloane can just print them out again at her office tomorrow. Sloane, please clean this mess up quickly. Your sister is in immense pain and needs a sterile environment to rest." I looked at the pink sludge ruining my professional documents. Then I looked slowly up at Gemma. She expected me to yell, to cry, to jump up, point fingers, and demand my money back right then and there. She desperately wanted me to look like the crazy, unhinged, jealous older sister attacking a poor, bandaged car crash victim in front of our horrified, enabling parents. She wanted to trigger my anger so she could weaponize my reaction and use it to justify whatever lies she was spinning. But a predator does not roar before it strikes its prey. I slowly picked up the ruined, sticky papers, dropped them gracefully into the trash can beside my desk, and handed Gemma a perfectly dry, clean napkin. "Of course," I said, smiling a slow, chilling smile that did not reach my eyes. "Accidents happen to all of us. Just make sure you get plenty of deep rest, Gemma. You are going to need all the energy you can get." She flinched slightly, pulling her hand back as if I had burned her. That calm, collected, eerily quiet smile deeply unsettled her. It was not the unhinged reaction she had meticulously planned for. I left them aggressively fussing over her in the living room, fluffing her pillows and adjusting the thermostat to her exact liking. I walked down the hall and locked myself securely inside my bedroom, making sure the deadbolt clicked into place. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed the only person in the world who could help me orchestrate this execution flawlessly. Declan was a ruthless corporate lawyer I had met through work 3 years ago. We had bonded instantly over our shared love of brutal efficiency, airtight contracts, and deep-dish Chicago pizza. He was brilliant, unsentimental, and he despised my family almost as much as I was rapidly beginning to. "Tell me someone died," Declan answered on the second ring, his voice echoing slightly as if he were standing in an empty, glass-walled boardroom. "Because you know better than to call me during the workday unless there is active bleeding, a massive lawsuit, or a multi-million-dollar breach of contract." "Worse," I said, pacing the length of my hardwood floor, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Gemma stole the $60,000 from the wall safe. And she stole my identity to open a high-interest medical credit card. She got massive plastic surgery in Beverly Hills and is currently sitting in my living room, drinking a smoothie and pretending she was in a tragic car crash." A heavy, stunned silence hung on the line for a solid 5 seconds. Then I heard Declan let out a low, appreciative whistle. "Okay, that is bold. Even for the golden child, that is a new level of sociopathy. That is federal crime territory. Do you have concrete, undeniable proof?" "I have the luxury clinic receipt she stupidly left shoved in the back of the safe. I have the credit alert on my phone showing the fraudulent account opened in my name. But I need more. I need to prove exactly how she got into the safe without triggering the biometric alarms or forcing the lock." "The camera," Declan said immediately, his tone sharpening instantly into pure, aggressive legal strategy. 3 months ago, after my cleaning lady accidentally broke an expensive vase and hid the pieces instead of telling me, I had installed a high-definition micro-hidden camera on my top bookshelf. It was motion-activated, connected directly to my encrypted cloud storage, and pointed straight at my closet door. I had forgotten about it in the initial, blinding shock of finding the empty safe. "I am checking it right now," I said, putting Declan on speakerphone and rapidly pulling up the security application on my laptop. I scrolled back through the timeline to the exact date of my departure to Seattle. Fast-forwarding through hours of an empty, still room, I finally saw a flicker of movement. The video quality was terrifyingly crisp. Gemma walked slowly into my room, looking around nervously like a cornered animal, clutching a large designer tote bag. But she was not alone. Delia walked in right behind her. My own mother. I watched, paralyzed, my blood running cold, as my mother walked confidently over to the closet, moved the heavy winter coats aside, and slid the false panel away with practiced, deliberate ease. I turned up the volume on my laptop until the speakers hummed with static. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Gemma's voice was whiny, trembling with fake anxiety. "What if Sloane finds out before the semester starts?" "She will kill me." "She will not." My mother's voice was firm, reassuring, and devoid of any guilt or hesitation. "Sloane never checks this thing unless she has to. And by the time she finally notices the money is gone, you will already be fully recovered, looking beautiful and enrolled in classes. Your father will talk her down. He always does. She always forgives us, Gemma. She has to, we are family. Ready? The backup code is 0419. My birthday. My mother used my own birthday to help rob me blind. I watched, sick to my stomach, as Gemma punched in the numbers, pulled out the heavy stacks of my hard-earned cash, and stuffed them greedily into her leather tote bag. My mother patted her on the shoulder, smiling warmly at her, as if they had just baked a cake together instead of committing grand larceny against their own flesh and blood. Seeing Gemma take the money was a deep, painful sting. Seeing my own mother hand her the combination and validate the theft? That was the execution of my mercy. Any lingering ounce of familial loyalty I had left simply evaporated into thin air. I closed the laptop softly. "Did you find it?" Declan asked, his tone shifting into serious, litigious lawyer mode. "I found it," I whispered, staring blankly at the closet door. "My mother helped her do it. She gave her the code." "Sloane," Declan said softly, dropping the sarcastic persona entirely. "You know exactly what you have to do, right? If you let this go, if you cover for them one more time, you're legally liable for that massive credit card debt. You are an underwriter. You know the law. You have to file a formal police report for identity theft. You have to destroy them." "I am not just going to destroy them," I said, my voice hardening into impenetrable steel. "I am going to make them build the gallows themselves." Sunday evening arrived with the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of a brewing thunderstorm. Following a long-standing family tradition, my parents had invited my Aunt Hollis over for dinner. Hollis was my mother's younger sister, a deeply bitter, judgmental woman who served as the family's primary flying monkey. Her entire personality revolved around gossiping, amplifying my mother's toxic opinions, and consistently reminding everyone that I was far too focused on my career to ever find a husband or build a real life. The dining table was set with our finest china, the good silver reflecting the warm overhead chandelier light. The smell of roasted beef and garlic mashed potatoes filled the room, creating an illusion of domestic bliss. Gemma was seated at the head of the table like a wounded queen, still swathed in her dramatic white bandages, picking delicately at her food. I sat quietly at the opposite end, sipping a glass of sparkling water, internally reviewing the timeline of the trap I was about to spring on all of them. "I just cannot believe the sheer bravery it takes to survive a hit and run," Aunt Hollis declared, reaching over to pat Gemma's hand with exaggerated sympathy. "You are a warrior, sweetie. And to think, you are still planning to start law school next month. That is incredible dedication. Not everyone has that kind of drive." Hollis shot a pointed, condescending look in my direction. "At least someone in this family is doing something meaningful with their life. Going to law school, fighting for justice in the courtroom. You just stare at boring spreadsheets all day, Sloane. When are you going to do something that actually impacts the world?" The sheer irony of the situation was almost intoxicating. I looked at Hollis, then at Gemma. Gemma blinked her heavily bruised eyes innocently, playing the humble martyr. "I cannot wait to make you all proud," Gemma said, her voice a fragile, theatrical whisper. "I have already bought my textbooks online. I have been reading about corporate liability while resting in bed. I want to be a voice for the voiceless. My father beamed with pride, raising his wine glass in a toast. To Gemma. Tomorrow morning, first thing, I am calling the dean's office at the law school. I am going to authorize the transfer of the $60,000 from Sloan's escrow hold directly into their tuition account. Our little girl is officially going to be a lawyer. My mother clapped her hands together, fake tears of joy pooling in her eyes. Oh, Tobias, it is just wonderful. Finally, all the pieces are falling into place for our family. Everything is going to be perfect. Yes, I said quietly, setting my glass down on the table. The sharp clink of the crystal against the wood silenced the room for a fraction of a second. Tomorrow morning is going to be a very big day for all of us. I strongly recommend everyone gets a good night's sleep. We have a lot of business to handle. Gemma stared at me across the table, her jaw tightening beneath the bandages. She knew something was wrong. She could sense the absence of my usual anxiety. For years, I had been the anxious fixer, constantly terrified of the next family crisis, rushing to smooth things over. Tonight, I was the storm itself, calm and destructive. I ate my dinner in silence, letting them gorge themselves on their delusions. She was a phenomenal actress, playing the tragic victim and the ambitious scholar perfectly. But unfortunately for her, I was the director of the show, and I was about to drop the final curtain. Monday morning broke with a sharp, blinding sunlight that poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my high-rise apartment. By 8 o'clock, the living room was humming with anxious, electric energy. My father, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt as if he were attending an actual business meeting, was pacing the hardwood floor with his smartphone gripped tightly in his hand. My mother was sitting on the sofa, nervously twisting a tissue into knots, while Gemma lounged on the recliner, pretending to read a thick, uncracked legal thriller she had bought at the airport gift shop. I sat calmly at the kitchen island, sipping a cup of dark, bitter coffee. My laptop was open in front of me. On the screen, hidden from their view, was an active FaceTime call with Declan. He was sitting in his downtown corner office, wearing a sharp gray suit, sipping his own coffee, and watching my living room through the webcam like it was a premium pay-per-view boxing match. Okay, it is 8:30 in Chicago, which means it is 6:30 in California, my father announced, his voice trembling with anticipation. But the admissions portal said the Dean of Admissions takes early calls for international and out-of-state tuition transfers. I have the wire routing numbers right here. Call them, Dad, Gemma urged, her voice tight and slightly breathless. Let us just get it over with so I can be officially enrolled and we can celebrate. He nodded gravely, dialing the number listed on the beautiful, forged acceptance letter my mother had emailed me weeks ago. He put the phone on speaker so we could all share in the glorious, historic family moment. The phone rang 3 times, the sound echoing in the quiet room. Admissions office, this is Dean Orson speaking, a deep, authoritative voice answered. My father smiled broadly, puffing out his chest. Good morning, Dean Orson. This is Tobias Wilson, calling from Chicago. I am calling to finalize the escrow tuition transfer for my daughter, Gemma Wilson. She is an incoming first-year student in your fall program. We have the $60,000 ready to clear into your accounts today. There was a long, confusing pause on the other end of the line. The clicking sound of a keyboard echoed through the speaker. I am sorry, Mr. Tobias. Could you spell the last name for me one more time? My father slowly spelled our last name, enunciating every letter clearly. The typing continued for a few agonizing seconds. Mr. Tobias, I am currently looking at the incoming class roster for the fall semester, Dean Orson said, his tone shifting from professional to profoundly confused. I have no record of a Gemma Wilson in our system. Not in the accepted pool, not in the wait list, and not even in the rejected applicant files. Are you sure you have the right university? The color instantly drained from my father's face, leaving him looking sickly pale. He looked at Gemma, who had suddenly gone rigid in her recliner, the prop book slipping from her lap onto the floor. No, that is impossible. I am looking at her official acceptance letter right now. It has your school's official crest. It is signed by Dean Richard Alden. Another heavy, suffocating pause on the phone. When Dean Orson spoke again, his voice was chillingly cold and professional. Mr. Tobias, Richard Alden retired from this university 5 years ago. We have not used that specific letterhead since 2019. Whoever gave you that letter has committed academic forgery. I suggest you look into this matter privately before making any financial transfers. Have a good day. The line went dead with a sharp click. The silence in the living room was deafening. It was the kind of silence that follows a massive explosion, right before the dust begins to settle and the damage is revealed. My father stared at his phone screen, his mouth slightly open, his mind unable to process the sheer magnitude of the lie. He slowly turned his head toward the recliner. "Gemma," my father whispered, his voice cracking, devoid of all its former pride. "What did you do? Where did that letter come from?" Gemma began to hyperventilate. Her hands gripped the armrests of the chair, her knuckles turning bone white. "It is a mistake. Their system is broken. I got in, Dad, I swear to God I got in. They just lost my file." My father's face hardened. He turned to Gemma, his voice trembling with a terrifying, quiet rage he had never directed at her before. "What did you do?" I did not let her spin another lie. I did not give her a single second to formulate a new excuse or manipulate my father's broken heart. I stood up from the kitchen island, picked up a thick manila folder I had meticulously prepared the night before, and walked slowly into the center of the living room. I did not scream. I did not yell. I simply dropped the folder onto the glass coffee table. The heavy smack of the paper hitting the glass echoed like a gunshot. "There is no mistake, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through the rising panic like a surgical scalpel. "She never applied to law school. She never took the entrance exams. The letter was a digital template she bought online for $20 and photoshopped in her bedroom." "Sloan, what are you talking about?" my mother cried, jumping up from the sofa and rushing to Gemma's side. "Do not attack your sister. She just survived a horrible crash. She is confused." "She did not survive a crash, Mom," I replied smoothly, opening the folder. I pulled out the glossy, itemized receipt from the Beverly Hills Elite Recovery Clinic and slid it across the glass table directly toward my father. "She survived elective cosmetic surgery." My father picked up the paper with trembling hands. His eyes darted back and forth across the sterile text, trying to make sense of the words. I read the numbers aloud, making sure every single syllable hit them like a physical blow to the chest. Rhinoplasty, $15,000. Premium full body liposuction, $20,000. Buccal fat removal and dermal fillers, $25,000. Total, $60,000. Paid in full. With physical cash. My father dropped the paper. He looked at Gemma, who was now sobbing hysterically, burying her bandaged face in her trembling hands. "You stole the tuition money," my father gasped, holding his chest as if he were experiencing a heart attack. "You broke into your sister's safe and stole her life savings to change your face?" "She did not act alone," I added, my voice devoid of any mercy or hesitation. I reached for the television remote resting on the side table. I had already connected my laptop to the massive flat-screen TV in the living room via a wireless casting app. I pressed a single button. The large screen flickered to life, displaying the crystal-clear security footage from my bedroom. The video played in high definition. There was Gemma, nervous and clutching the tote bag. And there was my mother, Delia, confidently moving the winter coats aside to reveal the hidden panel. The audio pumped through the surround sound speakers, crisp and undeniable. "She never checks this thing unless she has to. She always forgives us, Gemma. She has to, we are family. Ready? The backup code is 0419. My father stumbled backward, collapsing heavily onto the sofa next to my mother. He looked at his wife, the woman he had been married to for 30 years, as if she were a dangerous stranger. The devastation in his eyes was almost hard to watch. "Delia," he whispered, his voice broken into 1,000 pieces. "You gave her the code? You helped her rob our own daughter." My mother burst into frantic, ugly tears. She reached for his arm, but he violently pulled away, standing up to put distance between them. "Tobias, please, you do not understand." She was so depressed. She hated her nose. She hated her body. She felt so insecure seeing all those beautiful girls online. I just wanted her to be happy. Sloane has so much money. She is always fine. I knew she would figure it out. If you think the shock of the video was the end of it, you vastly underestimate the delusion of a golden child and her enabler. Keep watching, because Gemma's next move was pure insanity. Gemma threw the thick blanket off her lap and stood up, swaying slightly on her feet. The tears soaking into her bandages were real now, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of violent, narcissistic rage because she had finally been caught in a lie she could not charm her way out of. "You're a monster, Sloane," Gemma screamed, pointing a trembling, manicured finger at me. "You set me up. You have millions in your investment accounts, and you would not even give me a simple loan to fix my face. I need to look perfect for my career. You do not understand the pressure because you just sit in a boring cubicle all day. You force me to do this because you are a cheap, jealous, bitter spinster." My mother immediately jumped in to defend her, her maternal instincts blindly protecting the wrong child. "She is right, Sloane. Why did you have to embarrass her like this in front of your father? You could have just asked us about it privately. Setting up hidden cameras in your own home? That is a massive invasion of our privacy. You're sick in the head." I actually laughed. A cold, hollow sound that echoed off the walls and silenced them both. The sheer, audacious gaslighting was spectacular to witness. They had broken into my hidden safe, stolen 60 grand in cash, and somehow, in their twisted reality, they were the victims of a privacy violation. "I am sick," I asked, taking a slow, deliberate step toward Gemma. "Let us talk about sick, Gemma. Let us talk about the secondary charges listed on that clinic receipt." I pointed to the laptop still resting on the kitchen island. "Declan, are you still there?" Loud and clear, Sloane. Declan's voice boomed through the laptop speakers, startling my family so badly my mother physically jumped. "Who is that?" my father demanded, looking around wildly. "That is my corporate attorney," I said, folding my arms across my chest. "Declan, would you please clearly explain the legal situation my sister is currently facing?" "Gladly," Declan said, his tone razor-sharp and entirely devoid of empathy. "Gemma, you did not just steal $60,000 in physical cash. That is grand larceny, which is a severe crime on its own. But you also used Sloane's corporate medical insurance details to pay for your post-operative painkillers and nursing care. Furthermore, you forged her physical signature to open a $10,000 CarePlus medical credit line to pay for your luxury accommodations. Under the law, that constitutes felony identity theft and wire fraud." Gemma froze. The screaming abruptly stopped. Her mouth dropped open beneath the white bandages, her chest heaving as the reality of the words sank in. I was going to pay the credit card off," she stammered, her voice shrinking into a terrified, pathetic squeak. "I just needed a few months to secure some new brand deals." "The intent to repay does not magically negate the felony of forging a signature to secure credit," Declan replied smoothly. "You committed multiple federal crimes. And because you crossed state lines to California to execute this fraud, it falls under federal jurisdiction. Sloane is legally required to report this to the authorities immediately to clear the fraudulent debt from her credit profile. In fact, she already has." My mother gasped, clutching her chest as if she had been shot. "Sloane, no. Tell him you are dropping it right now. You cannot send your own sister to prison." "I am not sending her to prison," I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper. "Her own arrogant actions are. And for the first time in her entire life, no amount of fake tears, no cute dimples, and no brand new cheekbones can save her from the flashing red and blue lights pulling into our driveway." Right on cue, the heavy, undeniable sound of a police siren chirped twice in the street below my apartment window. The next 30 minutes were a blur of chaotic reality crashing down on the Wilson Family Museum of Excuses. 2 uniformed Chicago police officers knocked firmly on my door. I unlocked it, let them in, and handed them the manila folder containing the clinic receipt, the credit alert documents, the forged law school letter, and a flash drive containing the high-definition security footage of the theft. When the officers approached Gemma to formally read her Miranda rights, my mother completely lost her mind. She threw herself between Gemma and the officers, screaming hysterically that it was a simple family misunderstanding, a private loan that got temporarily out of hand. The larger officer warned her sternly that she would be arrested for obstruction of justice if she did not step aside immediately. My father did not move to help his wife. He sat frozen on the sofa, staring blankly at the hardwood floor, his entire reality shattered into dust. Gemma was hyperventilating, struggling against the officer's grip, begging my father to do something to save her. Dad, please. Tell them to stop. Call your lawyer. Pay my bail, please. My father slowly looked up. He looked at Gemma, then at my mother, and finally at me. For the first time in 30 years, the thick fog of the golden child delusion seemed to have lifted from his eyes. He finally saw the ugly rot at the core of his family. I have no money for bail, Gemma, he said, his voice hollow and defeated. You stole the last of it. And even if I did, I would not pay it. Gemma let out a horrific, guttural scream as the officer pulled her arms behind her back and placed the cold steel handcuffs around her wrists. Because she was still recovering from major surgery, they allowed her to keep her oversized jacket draped over her shoulders, but the visual was stunningly pathetic. The beautiful, entitled influencer, her face wrapped in medical bandages, being escorted out of my high-rise apartment in cuffs. As they led her toward the door, my mother dropped to her knees on the floor in front of me. She grabbed my hands, weeping uncontrollably, mascara running down her face. Sloan, I am begging you on my knees. I will do anything. I will work 3 jobs. I will pay you back every single cent. Just call them and drop the charges. Please, she is fragile. She will not survive in jail. I looked down at the woman who had used my birth date as the combination to betray me. The gravity in the room had reversed. I was no longer the invisible janitor sweeping up their messes. I held power over their lives. I am not dropping the identity theft charges, I said clearly. I cannot do that, or I will be held financially responsible for the debt she racked up in my name. However, I will offer a plea deal to the prosecutor regarding the cash theft on 2 non-negotiable conditions. My mother looked up, a desperate, pathetic hope shining in her eyes. Anything. Name it. Condition 1. You and Dad sign a legally binding document drafted by Declan, relinquishing any and all future claims to my finances. You will never ask me for a loan, a bailout, or a favor ever again. Condition 2. Gemma pleads guilty to the lesser charges, declares total bankruptcy, and pays me back the $60,000 through a court-mandated wage garnishment from a legitimate, physical, W-2 paying job. No influencer money. Hard, physical labor. My mother nodded frantically, her tears dripping onto the floor. Yes, we will sign it. She will do it. I pulled my hands away from her desperate grasp. Then get out of my apartment. Both of you. Fast forward 6 months. The thick dust has finally settled, and the landscape of my family is unrecognizable from what it used to be. Gemma did not go to federal prison. Her lack of prior criminal history, combined with my agreement to a strict plea deal, kept her behind bars for only a few terrifying days before she was given 3 years of intense probation and 500 hours of mandatory community service. However, the court-ordered financial restitution meant she had to get a real, grueling job. The holistic wellness influencer career died a swift death the moment her mugshot, featuring a bandaged face, smeared makeup, and a terrified expression, leaked onto local social media forums. Currently, Gemma works 40 hours a week as a cashier and janitor at a massive chain gas station on the outskirts of town. It is ironically similar to the exact job I worked to buy my first car when I was 16. Every 2 weeks, exactly 25% of her minimum wage paycheck is automatically garnished by the state and deposited directly into my investment account. It will take her decades to pay me back in full, but I check the small deposits every single time. Not for the money, but for the principle of the matter. My parents' marriage did not survive the radioactive fallout. The revelation that my mother had actively conspired to steal from me and lie to my father shattered whatever frail trust remained between them. Tobias filed for legal separation shortly after the court date. He moved out of the family home and into a small, one-bedroom apartment downtown. He calls me occasionally, trying awkwardly to rebuild a relationship. I answer sometimes. We talk about the weather and my work promotions, keeping things safely superficial. He is trying, but the damage is too deep to ever fully repair. Delia moved in with Aunt Hollis. They spend their days drinking cheap wine and bitterly complaining to anyone who will listen about how cruel and unfeeling the modern generation is, blind to their own toxic behavior. I blocked both of their numbers. As for me, I am thriving. I got a massive promotion at the firm, largely because my focus is sharper than ever, and I moved into an even nicer penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling views of the Chicago skyline. I sleep soundly every single night. I no longer flinch when my phone rings, terrified of what family disaster I have to swoop in and fix next. Looking back at the empty safe, I realize it was the best thing that ever happened to me. They call it family loyalty. They say blood is thicker than water and that you should always forgive your family because they are all you have. I call it financial and emotional abuse wrapped in a pretty, socially acceptable bow. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for a toxic person is to stop saving them from themselves and let them hit the pavement. Was I too harsh for calling the police on my own sister, or was it the brutal reality check she desperately needed to finally grow up? Let me know what you would have done in the comments below. If you believe in drawing hard boundaries and refusing to be a victim, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories.